There may be trouble ahead for West Ham. Let's talk about the Afcon. African Cup of Nations returns this campaign, and the tournament is set to have a rather large impact on the Premier League season, but not just the Premier League season, on individual teams, and in particular, West Ham. And as usual, the prestigious competition will be taking place over the winter, beginning on January the 13th and ending on February the 11th, 2024. This means key players in all but nearly all of the teams in the Premier League are set to miss crucial fixtures for their clubs over that period. Now, as mentioned, the Afcon will begin on January the 13th, with the final set to take place on February the 11th. Now, many people turn around and actually say, why do the Afcon get the priority to run the event at the time it does, in the month that it does? And there's a couple of key points here. What I didn't know was that the African Cup of Nations started before the Euros. So why should the Euros dictate what goes on with the African nations? If anything, if you go by the dates of, the tournaments, etc., then in theory, by trying to challenge them and say change the dates, you could try to challenge what happens with the Euros and do it the other way around. And also, another reason is that parts of Africa are known in the summer months to have really bad torrential rain. Hence the reason that they put the full focus on the winter time in the UK. But like I mentioned, AFCON will begin on January the 13th, with the final set to take place on February the 11th, 2024. And this is placed right in the middle of a very busy Premier League season and just after a typically hectic Christmas period. However, something to be mindful of is the top flight football will stop in the mid-season winter break, just as a tournament in Ivory Coast that gets underway. Now, the Premier League will pause after the festive fixtures from January the 14th to January the 30th, and clubs will play their final top flight games on Saturday, January the 13th, before enjoying 2 weekends off from the Premier League football. And all players featuring in the tournament will definitely miss the final game before the break, as they will have already travelled to train with their countries. Now, just to give you a little bit of an insight of what players could miss from what teams, let's just take a very brief look at West Ham. You've got Cornet, Aguerd, Benrahma, Kudus, all players that are represented at the African Cup of Nations. Now, the tournament hasn't been, all the teams haven't qualified, so that's all still all up for grabs. But there are still circumstances there. Tottenham have got Basuma. Liverpool have got, obviously, Mo Salah, just to name a few of the players in the situation. Manchester United could find themselves without their goalkeeper for very crucial fixtures coming up in due course as well. But from then on, whatever stage the player keeps progressing through the tournament means that they're potentially going to miss more top flight games, and that is down to their country's opportunities for progressing into the tournament. But if a player's knocked out early, they could well be back in action for the club's league games on January the 30th or 31st. However, if a player, like I said, reaches the final, they could miss a total, depending on what team they play for, of 4 or 5 or even 6 fixtures for the respected clubs. So AFCON could play a big part in some clubs' success this season if they lose their key players for a significant amount of times. And teams probably will be hoping that their stars don't go far in the tournament, of course, because that means they benefit by having the players back in the swing of things with their club. Now, West Ham could have a big problem because, as we've been kind of touting around over our social media accounts, you've got Kudus, who plays for Ghana. You've got Benrahma, who plays for Algeria. You've got Max Cornet, who plays for the Ivory Coast. You've got Naif Aguerd, who plays for Morocco. So you've got 4, well, you could say really key players there. But what's really interesting is 3 of those key players predominantly cover our whole left-hand side. So if you lose Benrahma, you lose Kudus, and you lose Max Cornet, what do West Ham do? This is why strength and depth is really key for me. Strength and depth to have those bodies on the line to cover that area. I've seen so many replies come through to us and say, don't worry, we're cool, we'll get back, we're fine. We've got Pablo Fornals, we've got players that can cover different areas, but you need strength and depth because we're going to have a whole host of fixtures. I've looked through the fixtures. A player, if their team advances through to the final, can miss potentially upwards of 6 games, depending on what stage they do leave the country to go and travel with their national home countries. So we could be looking at a player like Jesse Lingard having to come in to offer strength and depth on the short-term contract. This is where you start to build up why he may work for us. We've got some youth product there as well. Kudus is a player that I would love to see make the step up into the senior team. I think he is capable. I'm concerned about saying that because every time I say that about a youth player, in a couple of years' time, they definitely leave. But I think Kudus, who captains, the team below, is definitely someone that can make the step up and move out to the left-hand side. But what you do need is bodies on the team. You definitely need that because this is without taking into consideration West Ham having any bans of players if they pick up enough yellow cards or a red card and or injuries as well. So our whole left-hand side could be decimated. But the key factor for me, in order for West Ham to prepare this far ahead, is to bring a player in like Jesse Lingard. And that's where you start to connect the dots. So for me, as much as it sounds like it could be wild for West Ham, if all these players do qualify for their nations tournament at the Afcon, then I don't think the trouble will be ahead because I think we're going to have enough strength and depth. We do know in advance what's happening. Bring in Jesse Lingard, that's fine. We'll have potentially a week or 2 weeks before the Afcon starts in order for West Ham to get our business sorted come January. So hopefully Tim Stagden and David Moyes are doing the business now in order to look at recruits to potentially bring in, because should we get to January and players like Max Cornet not feature for West Ham, then you probably could be saying goodbye to Max Cornet over that window. He may he may leave the club early in January before things happen. Who knows? But either way, West Ham have got some time in our hands to make the plan. Looks like we have got one of the plans sitting there training with the club before they make the announcement. What do you think? Put it in the comments and let me know your thoughts. Join me later on for the Hammers headlines. We'll be bringing you some more news from the West Ham world. And it doesn't matter that the transfer window is shut. It is just as relentless as it always has been. Take it easy, everyone. And of course, come on, you Irons.